They say honesty is brave, but sometimes it just makes everyone uncomfortable. There's this kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like rejection dressed in good manners. You speak from your chest, real, trembling, and the air shifts like someone cracked a window in winter. Suddenly no one is breathing the same. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's a glance down, a forced laugh, a too quick, "That's deep," and then they move on, like you brought a thunderstorm to a picnic. So you start editing, not just your words, your presence. You rehearse before meetings. You swap, "Why does this feel hollow?" with "Sounds great." You replace, "This isn't aligned with my values," with "Just playing devil's advocate." You become palatable, professional, forgettable. I didn't notice the shift at first. It started as little cuts. A comment left unread, a birthday forgotten, a meeting where my ideas floated in the air until someone else said them louder. And suddenly they mattered. I laughed it off. Guess I'm just the weird one. But late at night, brushing my teeth with the lights dim, I'd look up and see a version of myself I didn't recognize. Eyes still bright, but dimmed. Not because the world demanded it, but because I thought I had to choose between being seen and being safe. I used to think I was a lot. Too intense, too curious, too ready to break the script when the performance got stale. But lately, I've been wondering if I've just been too awake. And maybe being awake in a room full of sleepwalkers isn't inspiring. It's isolating. I asked a question once, in a classroom, not a complicated one. Just, if this is supposed to prepare us for real life, why does it feel so fake? The professor blinked. The class laughed. Then everyone looked down at their notes like they hadn't heard me. But I remember that moment more than any grade I ever got. Not because I was proud, but because that was the day I stopped raising my hand. I don't think people dislike truth. They just don't like where it leads. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. And then you're responsible for how you act, for what you tolerate, for what you stay silent about. So instead, they shrug. They say, "It's not that deep." And I smile, even when it is. Especially when it is. I've become good at smiling, at playing along, at asking, "How are you?" while choking back. Do you ever feel like no one actually knows you? That question has lived on the tip of my tongue for years, but I only ask it in dreams, or into pillows, or to mirrors when no one's home. Mirrors don't lie. They just reflect, and that's what I am, I think. A mirror. Not flawless, not polished, just honest. And sometimes being honest is the most dangerous thing you can be in a world built on performance. You say, "I don't feel okay," and people flinch. You say, "That felt performative," and they call you dramatic. You say, "I think we're all pretending," and suddenly, you're not invited to the next group dinner. I've soft-blocked pieces of myself just to survive. The poetic parts, the wondering parts, the "why does this matter" parts. But lately, I've been craving those pieces again. Not because they're useful, but because they're me. The ones who smile and nod while screaming inside, "I see you." The ones who speak up and get quieted by silence, "I hear you." The ones who ask too many questions and get labeled difficult, "I feel you." You are not too much. You are the mirror. And some people will avoid their own reflection at all costs. But that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're awake. And that's rare. And needed. Even if it's lonely. I sat in a meeting today. Said nothing. Nodded at everything. Walked out feeling like a shadow of myself. But when I got home, I poured a coffee, turned off the overhead light, and whispered a truth I hadn't dared say aloud in weeks. I miss myself. I used to think being left out meant you did something wrong. Now I know it can also mean you said something too right. They laughed When I asked why the group chat never talks about real things, someone replied with a meme. The conversation moved on, but my question stayed right there in my chest, like a song stuck on the wrong frequency. There's something quiet that happens when you're the one who reflects too much. You notice the joke that went too far, the sigh in someone's voice when they say they're fine. You catch it every time, because you're not just listening, you feel the in-between. And the thing is, people don't always want to be felt. They want to be seen, just enough, heard, just a little. But felt? No, that's too intimate, too exposing. So you become the person everyone kind of likes. But no one really invites the one who gets it, but somehow gets left behind. 5 signs you're the mirror in the room, and why it quietly hurts. 1, you speak the truth, and the room goes silent. Not because you were wrong, but because you said what no one wanted to admit. The elephant wasn't just in the room, you named it, and no one had the tools to sit with that. 2, you struggle with small talk. It feels like pretending. You try to play the game, weather, Netflix, did you see that post? But the words feel thin, like paper walls in a storm. You want to ask, are you really okay? But you already know the answer. 3, people come to you for advice, but don't come back. They say you're wise, they call you deep. But when your reflection gets too honest, they retreat as if clarity was a flame, and you held it too close to their excuses. 4, you feel lonelier in groups than when you're alone. There's noise, yes. Laughter, yes. But your soul is still whispering, I don't belong here. And no one hears it, except the version of you still sitting in the corner. 5, you dim your insight so others feel less exposed. You soften your tone, water down your thoughts, smile through discomfort, not because you want to lie, but because truth, uninvited, has a way of clearing rooms. You didn't mean to be the mirror. You just saw things too clearly, too early, and it made people uneasy. So they called you intense, dramatic, overthinking, too much. But you weren't too much. You were just unfiltered in a world that thrives on blur. A world that prefers filters, even in conversations. You scroll past another deep talk TikTok. The kind that says, real ones will get this. And you do. But no one in your real life ever wants to talk about it. You save the video. Send it to no one. That too feels like a metaphor. Someone once said, you always say the thing I'm too scared to admit. You smiled, but they stopped talking to you a month later. It shouldn't make sense, but it does. You became the version of truth they weren't ready to meet. So you started shrinking, not to disappear, but to survive. You laughed louder, agreed more, texted less, rewrote your captions to be less emotional, muted your own story before they could. And still, you missed being known, even when knowing you cost people their comfort. That's the thing about mirrors. They don't choose what to reflect. They just show. Then you've always been that. The quiet echo of what others tried to suppress. You wonder sometimes, would it have been easier to be a wall instead? Something flat, neutral, unseen. But then who would have reflected the parts no one talks about? Who would have reminded them that their mask is slipping, that their eyes are screaming, that their jokes are deflection, that their silence is a wound? Maybe it's lonely being the mirror, but maybe it's sacred too. Because in a world built on performance, your honesty is disruptive, and disruption is how truth begins again. I sat at lunch today, said something soft but real. They blinked, changed the subject, but one person stayed behind after. She said, "Thank you. I needed someone to say it." That was enough. Not everything, but enough. They didn't leave because you were wrong. They left because you made it impossible to keep pretending. You didn't show up with fire. You didn't start arguments. You didn't demand truth. You embodied it. And that is what broke the illusion. There's a difference between being mean and being clear. You were never unkind. You were just unwilling to play dumb for the sake of comfort. And comfort, that's the currency most people are unwilling to let go of. You say, "This feels off," and they hear, "You're wrong." You say, "Why are we pretending this works?" And they hear, "You're the problem, but you weren't the problem. You were the pause before the problem. The moment the mask slips, the moment the air feels heavier, the moment someone starts to feel their own conscience again, you aren't too much. You were just the one who turned the lights on, and everyone else hadn't adjusted yet." There's a quiet violence in being ignored when you're the only one telling the truth. Not because you want to be right, but because you want things to be real. Even if it hurts, even if it costs connection. You didn't break the group, you broke the silence. And silence, once broken, doesn't come back the same. I remember sitting at a cafe once, 2 friends across from me. We were laughing, sipping lattes, playing the part. And then one of them said, "Honestly, I don't even think I like my partner anymore." She said it like a joke, but her eyes didn't laugh. I looked at her, not with judgment, just with that kind of quiet pause that says, "I see you. Really?" And that moment, it lasted all of 2 seconds. Then she said, "Never mind, I'm being dramatic." They both laughed. I smiled, but the moment never left me, because that's what the mirror does. It doesn't speak first, it doesn't interrupt, it just witnesses. And in that witnessing, something holy happens, something ancient, like truth remembering its own name. That's what you've been all along. Not dramatic, not intense, not overthinking, just honest, just present, just the witness. And sometimes, that's the scariest thing in the room. You're not the villain, you're the reflection. And that's what makes people flinch. Because most folks aren't ready to see themselves, not as they are, but as they truly feel, as they've been pretending not to be. And that's when Kierkegaard whispered, "The truth is rarely comforting, but it is the only place where the soul breathes." I didn't understand it at first, but now I feel it in my bones, because comfort isn't always kindness, and silence isn't always peace, and pretending isn't always protection. Sometimes it's a prison. You didn't come here to perform. You came here to feel, to name, to ask the questions no one else dared to. And yes, it cost you some friendships. It made some rooms colder. It made some connections crack. But it also made space for the real ones, the ones who sit with discomfort, the ones who stay after the truth is spoken, the ones who say, "I don't have the answer, but thank you for saying it out loud." You thought they were rejecting you, but really, they were rejecting the part of themselves they hadn't made peace with yet. And that's not your fault. That's their journey. You are just the mirror, and mirrors, by design, reflect what's already there, nothing more, nothing less. I used to hate this part of me, the seeing, the sensing, the speaking. I tried to soften it, shrink it, blur it, but now I protect it because it's not a flaw, it's a gift, one that not everyone will know how to hold, but the ones who do, they'll never ask you to be less. They'll never need you to dim. They'll say, "Finally, someone who sees." You don't have to disappear just to be accepted. You don't have to shrink for love to stay. It took me years to understand that I could be soft and sharp, kind and confronting, present without pretending. Because for so long, I thought love only came when I dimmed the parts of me that made people uncomfortable. The too much, the too honest, the too awake. But here's what no one tells you. Dimming doesn't earn you belonging. It earns you performance-based tolerance. And that kind of connection, it drains you faster than solitude ever could. 5. Healing shifts for the mirror soul. The moment you stop dimming and start reflecting inward. 1. You speak the truth and let the silence be sacred. You no longer apologize for the discomfort your honesty creates. You let silence hang like a breath before thunder. Because sometimes, silence isn't rejection, it's reverence. 2. You stop apologizing for not doing small talk. You're not awkward. You're just hungry for depth, for conversations that go somewhere, for stories that start with, "I've never told anyone this," and that hunger is holy. 3. You give insight freely and release the need to be received. You no longer twist yourself, hoping they'll get it. Some people won't. That doesn't mean you stop sharing. It means you stop begging to be understood by those who fear understanding. 4. You create space where you feel seen, even if it's just with yourself. You light a candle while you journal. You eat slowly. You look in the mirror without rushing. You become your own witness. And the loneliness begins to soften. 5. You let the mirror reflect you too. For so long, you only reflected others, their fears, their projections, but now you pause and see you. Not their discomfort, not their avoidance, just your eyes, steady, real, unblurred. I used to think holding space for others meant erasing myself. Now I know. You can be a mirror without becoming invisible. You can reflect what's true without apologizing for the light you carry, even when that light exposes what others want to hide. Because here's the thing. You don't need to be less to be loved. You just need to be held, fully, gently, without flinching. And sometimes that starts with you. I've started telling the truth again, not in big ways, but in soft ones. Like when someone asks, "How are you?" And instead of saying, "I'm fine," I pause and say, "A little tired, a little lonely." But here, it's not dramatic, it's real. And sometimes the world softens back when you stop pretending. I no longer ghost my own thoughts, no longer mute my emotions so someone else feels safer, no longer rehearse every word to make sure it lands gently on fragile egos. I still choose kindness, but not at the cost of clarity. I still choose softness, but not silence. Because I'm learning that people who only love the edited version of me don't really love me. And that's okay. Let them go. Let them find conversations that don't challenge them. Let them surround themselves with reflections that flatter, not stretch. You were never made to entertain. You were made to illuminate. Even if that means walking into some rooms alone. Even if that means becoming your own safe space first. I once read, if it costs you your voice, it's too expensive. And I felt that, all the way down to the part of me I'd locked away in exchange for belonging. You're not too intense. You're not too serious. You're not too aware. You're just carrying clarity in a culture that numbs itself on noise. And while others scroll to forget, you feel to remember, to return, to root. So if today feels heavy, let it be. But don't dim, not again. You've worked too hard to come back to yourself. Let the mirror stay lit. Let it reflect the light that never asked permission to shine. You don't just wake up one day and decide to shrink. You start small. Softening a sentence, laughing when it stings, saying it's okay when it isn't, just to stay in the room. And before you know it, you're sitting in conversations like a ghost. Not invisible, just misunderstood in plain sight. They called you too much, but they never explained what that meant. Too much of what? Feeling? truth, awareness. Too much to digest, because your presence wasn't decoration, it was disruption. The kind that didn't knock over tables, just quietly moved the chairs. So people had to face each other for real. You asked real questions. Why are we like this? Do we actually care? Or are we pretending? You said things like, I'm tired, but not in my body, in my soul. And the room went still, because no one prepares for that kind of honesty. It peels the wallpaper off the walls. You weren't trying to be deep, you were trying to be honest. But in a world raised on filters and emojis, honesty is radical, and radicals rarely get welcomed at brunch. So they laughed, or changed the subject, or worse, they labeled you too much. That phrase followed you in break rooms, in birthdays, in group chats where your message got skipped like a song no one was in the mood for. It wasn't your words, it was your depth. You showed up with unedited energy, and they didn't know where to file you. Not quirky enough to be funny, not numb enough to be easy. So you became that friend, the intense one, the overthinker, the here we go again when you tried to speak your chest. They said you needed to lighten up. You tried, you really did. You started copying their tone. Short replies, more memes, fewer confessions. You even said us all when you were crying. But even your silence felt loud. Even your presence asked too much of them. Not because you demanded, but because you mirrored. And when people see themselves clearly, they either grow or walk away. Most walked, and every step they took away from you, you took inward. You journaled, you questioned, you doubted, you tried to shrink your heart to fit inside their attention span. But your heart was never designed for bullet points. I remember the first time someone thanked me for being too much. It was after I'd said something raw, not planned, not poetic. Just, I miss being around people I don't have to translate myself for. And they didn't flinch. They said, same. And that's when I realized the right people don't need subtitles. You were never too much. You were just speaking in full sentences to people still stuck in auto replies. And now I protect that too muchness. I set it a place at the table. I let it speak first. I let it leave the room when it's not respected. Because that part of me, the one that feels too deeply, notices too quickly, loves too wholly, that's my compass, my clarity, my crown, and I no longer trade it for shallow connections. Reclaiming the mirror, a new meaning for too much, too emotional. You were in tune with the world's grief before it learned how to cry. Too sensitive. You picked up frequencies others didn't even hear. Too serious. You were tired of laughing just to be liked. Too honest. You stopped editing your truth to fit someone else's comfort. Too deep. You lived in the ocean, while they stayed near shore and feared the tide. So here's the truth they never said. They weren't afraid of you. They were afraid of what came up in them when you walked in. Their guilt, their shadows, their abandoned dreams. You stirred it all, and instead of owning it, they blamed the mirror. That's what you are, a mirror with memory, a soul that reflects the parts so of others forgot how to love. Don't forget to love those parts in yourself. Don't forget that what they labeled as too much is the same energy that will one day call the right ones home. And they won't flinch. They won't soften your edges. They'll sit across from you, meet your gaze, and say, finally, someone who speaks my language. You are not a mistake. You are a mirror. And mirrors were never designed to be liked, only to be true. But I know the ache of being looked at, but never truly seen, of being included, but never quite welcomed, of being someone's sounding board, but never their resting place. You didn't ask to be this way, this awake, this sensitive, this painfully aware of everything that goes unspoken in a room. But now that you can't unfeel it, you can't unknow it, and honestly, you shouldn't have to. The world keeps telling people like you to soften, smile more, scroll faster, care less. But what if your depth isn't a liability? What if it's legacy? What if the fact that you cry at commercials, remember strange details about strangers, ask questions that linger too long, isn't a flaw in your wiring, but the very signal that you were meant to wake people up? I used to stand in front of the mirror and ask, why am I like this? As if it were an illness. As if noticing too much was the reason people left. But now, I see it, not like a light switch, more like a candle I finally stopped blowing out. I wasn't too much, I was too honest, and honesty is lonely when everyone else is still in costume. There's a softness that arrives when you stop editing your soul to fit someone else's comfort. When you let the mirror reflect you, not just what others want to see, not just the acceptable angles, but the full, raw, beautiful blur that is being human. Because being real in a curated world is an act of rebellion. And you, my friend, are quietly revolutionary. Here's what I hope you remember. You are not too much. You were just born to hold emotions most people spend lifetimes avoiding. You are not too serious. You just refuse to laugh when your heart is breaking. You are not too sensitive. You just hear the songs between people's silences. You are not too deep. You just aren't afraid of what lies beneath the surface. And most of all, you are not too honest. You just love this world enough to want it real. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from accepting yourself in the very room that asked you to hide. That's what healing is, not becoming different, but finally recognizing who you've been all along and whispering, I'm proud of you. You stayed. You stayed soft. You stayed awake. You stayed true. Even when it cost you. Even when it almost broke you. You are not the afterthought. You are the anchor. You are not the side character. You are the story they don't have the courage to tell. So here is your quiet assignment. Not to change, not to fix, but to witness yourself. Just once. Fully. Without the filter, without shrinking. Stand in front of the mirror. No mask, no edits. Just eyes, just breath, just you. And say it. Say what no one else did. Say what the world forgot to offer. I see you, and I'm not leaving. Try this today. Look in the mirror. Don't adjust your hair. Don't fix your face. Just look and whisper, I'm still here. Because you are. You've survived every room that didn't know what to do with you. You've softened in all the right ways and held your shape in the ones that mattered. You are not the mistake. You are a mirror. And some rooms simply weren't ready for that kind of clarity. Let them go, not with anger, but with truth. Because the rooms that are meant for you will not only see you, they'll stay. Maybe I wasn't too much. Maybe they just weren't ready for the version of me that finally liked what I saw.